You're not alone. God heals what depression tried to destroy. Have you ever wondered why God allows your soul to grow silent, as if every prayer fades before it reaches heaven? Today, you'll uncover the hidden mystery behind divine silence, why the moments that feel like endings are often where God begins to heal what depression tried to destroy. Because maybe what you're living right now isn't abandonment. It's the exact place where your miracle is taking shape. I know this not from theory but from the journey itself, from nights when faith felt like a whisper and light seemed distant. I've seen hearts rebuild from ashes, and I've learned that divine restoration often starts when we stop pretending we're unbroken. Stay with me until the end, because what I'm about to reveal could completely change how you understand God's silence and how He's using it to bring your soul back to life. When the soul stops singing, there comes a time when the soul forgets its own melody. The rhythm of life slows, and the music that once filled your heart becomes a faint echo in the distance. You try to remember what joy felt like, but all you find is silence. A silence so deep that it begins to swallow your thoughts. It's not just sadness. It's the feeling of being disconnected from yourself, from others, and sometimes even from God. You wake up, but it feels like the world forgot you exist. You move, but inside, everything stands still. The light you once carried dims until it barely flickers, and yet somehow something inside you refuses to go out completely. When the soul stops singing, it doesn't mean you've lost your faith. It means your spirit is exhausted from fighting battles no one can see. You've been strong for too long, smiling when you wanted to cry, pretending to be fine when you were breaking apart. You've heard people say, just pray and it will pass, but they don't know the weight you carry or the silence you sleep beside every night. This is not weakness. It's the cry of a soul that needs rest. Even Jesus withdrew to lonely places to pray, to breathe, to weep. The Bible never said faith removes pain. It said faith gives pain a purpose. There is something sacred in this silence. When the world becomes too loud and your heart too tired, God speaks in ways that have no sound. The tears you hide are a language He understands perfectly. The sigh you release in the dark is a prayer that doesn't need words. Sometimes your silence is not a sign that God has left. It's the moment He draws closest, because He knows words are no longer enough. He knows that what you need isn't advice or explanations. You need presence, His presence. And even when you can't feel Him, He is there, sitting beside you in the stillness, waiting for the moment your spirit remembers the sound of hope again. When the soul stops singing, the enemy whispers that you are alone, that no one would understand, that life has lost its meaning. But that is the lie that feeds despair. You are not forgotten. You are not invisible. Even in your silence, you are seen by the one who created every note of your song. The melody may be faint, but it still exists inside you, waiting for the breath of God to bring it back to life. The same Spirit that raised Jesus from the dead still moves through your chest, even when you can barely breathe. There is a kind of beauty that only brokenness can reveal, because in that breaking, you start to see what really matters. The masks fall, the noise fades, and you are left with the truth of who you are. Not what the world said, not what your fears whisper, but who you are in the eyes of God. And in that truth, healing begins. God doesn't rush the process. He waits with you, gently lifting the pieces until they form something new, something stronger, something that carries the mark of grace. You are not being destroyed. You are being rebuilt. The silence that frightens you is often the workshop of heaven, where your spirit is being tuned again. So don't despise the stillness. Don't curse the nights that feel endless. The same God who placed the stars in their silent orbit also placed His promise in your soul. Every dawn that rises is proof that darkness has an expiration date. You may not feel joy yet, but the fact that you're still here, listening, breathing, hoping even a little, that's the sound of your song returning. It begins as a whisper, almost imperceptible, but it grows with every heartbeat that chooses to keep going. Let this moment be a pause, not an ending. The world tells you to move faster, to fix yourself, to get over it. But God is not in a hurry. He is patient because love never rushes healing. He is rewriting your melody, one note at a time, with hands that have known pain and resurrection. And when your soul begins to sing again, and it will not sound the same as before. It will be deeper, wiser, stronger. It will carry the sound of survival. You are not the silence you're living. You are the song that God is restoring. And no matter how far you think you've fallen, His grace reaches lower still. You may not be able to see it yet, but something sacred is happening in the quiet. God is tuning your heart to a new frequency of hope. Hold on. The melody isn't gone. It's being reborn. The shadow God allowed. Every life passes through shadows that no one asks for. Moments when light seems to vanish, and everything familiar turns uncertain. You look around and wonder where God has gone, why He allowed the darkness to come so close. Yet sometimes what feels like abandonment is actually invitation, an invitation to see God from a place you've never seen Him before. There are seasons when He doesn't remove the shadow, because He wants you to discover that His presence is not limited to the sunlight. Faith that only survives in brightness is fragile. Faith that learns to breathe in darkness becomes unshakable. The shadow is not a punishment. It is a teacher. It reveals what comfort hides and what success conceals. In the shadow, you meet the truth of who you are without the masks, without the applause, without the noise. There, stripped of everything that distracted you, you begin to hear what really matters. God does not send pain, but He allows moments that break your illusion of control so you can find what you were always meant to hold: His hand. The same God who parted the Red Sea also walked silently beside Elijah in the desert. The same Jesus who calmed the storm also slept through one. He allows the shadow not to destroy your faith, but to deepen it. When you walk through darkness, every step feels uncertain. You pray, but the answers don't come. You cry, and it seems no one hears. Yet faith is not proven by the clarity of the path. It's proven by the decision to keep walking when nothing makes sense. God often works behind the curtain of confusion, shaping the miracle in silence. Think of Joseph forgotten in prison, Moses exiled in Midian, David hiding in caves. Each was shadowed, unseen, misunderstood. But the darkness that covered them was also preparing them for the light that would later reveal them. The shadow exposes what comfort hides: our dependence on control, our addiction to certainty. We want to know every answer, every reason, every outcome. But faith is born where explanations end. When you no longer have a plan, you finally learn what it means to trust. The shadow strips away your false securities, not to leave you empty, but to make room for God's presence to become enough. In that place, you discover something sacred. That peace isn't the absence of fear. It's the awareness that God is still with you despite it. You see, the shadow has purpose. It's in the shadow that your roots grow deeper, reaching for water unseen. A tree doesn't grow strong in constant sunlight. It needs darkness for its roots to strengthen. In the same way, your faith is being grounded, your heart being refined. God knows exactly how much light you need and how much darkness will teach you to trust. He doesn't measure your life by comfort, but by growth. And growth almost always requires mystery. The mistake we make is assuming that because we can't see the light isn't there. But light doesn't cease to exist just because clouds cover it. The sun still burns above the storm. The same way, God's love is constant even when hidden behind your pain. What you feel as silence is often the stillness before the breakthrough. The shadow may be long, but it cannot outlast the dawn that's already on its way. So instead of asking, "Why did God allow this?" maybe ask, "What is He trying to show me through this?" That question transforms despair into discovery. The shadow then becomes a place of revelation, not defeat. You begin to realize that the same God who seems silent in your suffering is quietly shaping strength in your soul. Every unanswered prayer, every sleepless night, every tear has been collected in His care. None of it is wasted. There will come a day when you'll look back and understand that the shadow was not proof of God's absence, but evidence of his attention. He allowed it because he trusted that your faith could survive what others thought would destroy you. The valley you walk now will one day be the testimony you share. The darkness that once terrified you will become the backdrop for God's light to shine even brighter. The shadow doesn't mean the end of your story. It's the chapter where the author steps in unseen, writing redemption into the very lines that felt hopeless. So do not fear what the night hides, because the one who allowed the shadow is also the one who commands the sunrise. You are not forgotten in this valley. You are being prepared in it. And when the light returns, it will not just illuminate your path. It will reveal how close he was all along. The disguise of strength. There is a silent exhaustion that comes from pretending you are strong when your soul is crumbling inside. You tell everyone you're fine, you keep smiling, you show up, you perform, you carry others, and you convince yourself that breaking is not an option. You wake up every day wearing the mask of control, but when the night falls and no one is watching, the truth reveals itself. You're tired, not of life, but of pretending to live it without falling apart. This disguise of strength is one of the heaviest burdens a human can carry, and yet so many believers wear it every single day. We've been taught to be warriors of faith, to fight every battle with a verse on our lips and courage in our hearts. But no one ever told us that even warriors bleed. No one explained that true strength is not found in the absence of pain, but in the honesty of acknowledging it. There's a quiet kind of suffering in those who always appear composed, the ones who encourage others while silently falling apart themselves. You pray for others to be healed while you can barely breathe through your own storm. You help people find their light, even while yours flickers in the dark. The truth is, God never asked you to be invincible. He only asked you to be real. When Jesus stood before the cross, he wept. He sweat blood in anguish. He cried out in abandonment. The Savior of the world allowed himself to be weak, so that humanity could understand that vulnerability is not sin. It's sacred. You don't need to pretend before a God who already knows every fragment of your heart. He doesn't love the version of you that looks strong. He loves the version of you that's trembling but still refuses to give up. The disguise of strength may earn the world's respect, but it robs you of the intimacy that comes from being honest with your Creator. When you keep performing strength, you block the very grace that could restore you. Because grace doesn't flow through walls, it flows through cracks. God can't heal who you pretend to be. He heals who you really are. He waits for that moment when your performance ends and your honesty begins, when your prayer stops sounding perfect and starts sounding desperate. That's when heaven leans in closer. Many people confuse resilience with denial. Resilience doesn't mean suppressing your emotions. It means allowing God to walk through them with you. You were never meant to carry the weight of appearing okay. You were meant to rest in the truth that you are not. The cross is not just a symbol of suffering, it's the end of pretending. On that wood, Jesus showed the world what divine surrender looks like, not proud strength but humble honesty. If the Son of God could cry out in weakness, what makes you believe you must always be strong? You might be wondering how to remove the disguise when life still demands you to stand. It starts with a whisper, a simple admission to yourself and to God. I'm not okay. Those words open a door that pride has kept closed. You don't have to make them loud. You just have to mean them. God doesn't need polished speeches. He responds to truth spoken through tears. That moment of surrender is where healing begins. Because the moment you stop performing for the world, heaven starts working in you. This world praises independence, but the kingdom celebrates dependence on God, on grace, on love that doesn't need you to be flawless. You don't have to be the pillar that holds everyone up. You are allowed to lean. You don't have to be the one who fixes everything. You are allowed to fall apart. Because sometimes, falling apart is how God gathers the pieces that never fit together right. He rebuilds you, not in the image of strength the world expects, but in the image of wholeness that heaven intended. The disguise of strength doesn't protect you. It isolates you. The walls you build to keep pain out also keep love from getting in. The very thing you use to survive becomes the prison that keeps you from living. But when you start peeling back the layers, when you let your heart be seen, even by just one person, even if that person is God alone, the light begins to reach places you thought were forever lost. And in that light, you begin to see that your weakness was never something to hide. It was the invitation God used to bring you closer to Him. True strength is not about holding everything together. It's about allowing God to hold you when everything falls apart. It's not the armor you wear that makes you brave, but the faith that keeps beating under the armor when you're too tired to fight. The disguise can fall now. You don't need it anymore, because the one who created you is not asking for perfection. He's asking for your heart, raw, honest, and real. Let Him see it. Let Him heal it. And as He does, you'll realize that what you thought was weakness was actually the beginning of divine restoration. When faith collides with biology. There are moments when faith and the body seem to speak two different languages. You believe, you pray, you declare promises, yet your chest tightens, your breath shortens, your hands tremble, and your thoughts race beyond control. You try to cast it out with verses, to silence it with worship, but your heart keeps pounding like a frightened drum. You start to wonder if your faith is failing you, if you are somehow disappointing God by feeling what you feel. But the truth is simpler and kinder. Your biology is not your enemy, and your body is not betraying your faith. It's crying out for help, asking you to listen, not to feel guilty. For centuries, people have separated the spiritual from the physical, as if the soul lived in one room and the body in another. Yet God designed them as one. The same hands that shaped your spirit also molded your brain, your hormones, your nervous system. When depression or anxiety arrive, they do not erase your faith. They reveal that your humanity still needs care. The prophet Elijah called fire from heaven, confronted kings, and saw miracles unfold. Yet soon after, he collapsed under a tree, begging God to let him die. His story wasn't recorded to shame him, but to remind you that even the strongest believers can reach a breaking point where biology and belief collide. In those moments, prayer is not meant to replace healing. It's meant to walk beside it. Seeking help from a doctor, taking medication, talking to a counselor, or resting your body is not a lack of faith. It's a form of obedience. It's honoring the temple that God entrusted to you. You wouldn't call it weakness to mend a broken bone, so why call it sin to mend a broken mind? The God who created neurons and hormones knew they could falter, and He filled the world with wisdom, medicine, and compassion so that healing could come through many paths, both divine and human. When faith collides with biology, God is not standing on one side watching you struggle. He is in the collision itself, whispering, "Let me heal you through every means I've made available." Sometimes He restores the soul with peace that surpasses understanding. Sometimes He restores the body through science that surpasses our pride. Either way, the miracle remains His. You are not less spiritual for needing help. You are simply human, exactly as He designed you to be. Depression has a way of convincing you that prayer isn't working, that God isn't listening, that faith is broken. But maybe prayer isn't supposed to make pain vanish instantly. Maybe it opens a door for strength to enter gradually. When Jesus healed, sometimes He spoke a word and it happened immediately, but other times He sent people on a journey, asking them to walk, to wash, to go and show themselves to the priest. Healing was both divine and process. The same applies to you. Faith is not only in the moment you cry out to God, it's also in the days you keep moving while waiting for your body and mind to catch up with His promise. It's time to release the guilt that comes from thinking you should be stronger. Faith doesn't make you immune to exhaustion. It gives you endurance to survive it. There is holiness in taking your medication, in going to therapy, in resting, in breathing deeply. Those simple acts are not signs of defeat. They're acts of worship when done with gratitude to the one who gave you life. Healing is not always loud or miraculous. Sometimes it's slow, sacred, and invisible. The Spirit of God moves quietly through small things, restoring balance where chaos once reigned. If your faith and your body seem at odds right now, let them meet at the altar of acceptance. Let your prayer be honest. God, I believe, but my body is tired. Meet me here. He will, because he's not offended by your frailty. He's drawn to it. The Bible says his strength is made perfect in weakness, not in denial. The trembling of your hands does not cancel your faith. It may be the very tremor that brings you closer to his embrace. Faith and biology are not rivals. They are allies in the same story of redemption. God moves through both to bring you back to wholeness. The battle you feel inside is not proof that you are failing. It's proof that you are fighting. And as long as you're fighting, you're still alive, still chosen, still loved. God doesn't heal you because you are strong. He heals you because you are his. The voice beneath the noise. The world is loud, and the mind can be louder. Thoughts spiral like storms, worries echo without pause, and fear speaks in 1,000 voices at once. You try to pray, but your thoughts race faster than your words. You try to listen for God, but all you hear is confusion. It feels as if heaven went silent, leaving you alone inside your own noise. Yet beneath that chaos there is another voice, softer, steady, ancient, the one that never stopped speaking. The problem isn't that God has gone quiet. It's that the world has turned up its volume. Every sound competes for your attention, the news, the opinions, the expectations, the self-doubt. You scroll, you consume, you run, and your spirit gets buried under constant noise. But God doesn't shout over it. He waits beneath it. His presence isn't found in the earthquake or the fire, but in the gentle whisper, just as Elijah discovered in the cave. That whisper is the voice that says, "You are safe now. You are loved. You are still mine." It doesn't argue with your fears, it outlasts them. It doesn't demand silence. It teaches peace within it. When you slow down long enough to breathe, when you stop fighting to make sense of everything, that's when you begin to notice it. The whisper may sound like a memory of peace you thought was gone, or like a quiet strength rising from deep inside. Sometimes it comes as a sudden calm in the middle of panic, a thought that doesn't belong to your fear. You will be okay. That's him. He speaks in ways that bypass the intellect and reach the soul directly. You don't hear him with your ears, you recognize him with your heart. God's voice is not fragile, but it refuses to compete with the chaos you feed. It lives beneath the rush, beneath the overthinking, beneath the noise. You can drown it for a while, but it never leaves. It waits in the stillness you keep avoiding. That's why the greatest act of faith today might not be shouting louder prayers, but sitting quietly and letting the noise settle. In that sacred quiet, truth surfaces. You begin to realize that God has been guiding you all along, not through thunder, but through the gentle nudges of peace. Some people think hearing God means seeing visions or feeling overwhelming emotions. But often it's the opposite. It's ordinary, subtle, familiar. It's that sense of knowing what to do next when logic offers no direction. It's the forgiveness that blooms in your chest when bitterness seemed immovable. It's the strength that appears the moment before you fall apart. That's his language, not chaos but clarity, not pressure but presence. The voice beneath the noise does not condemn, it restores. It reminds you that even your doubts cannot scare him away. He doesn't need you to be perfect to speak. He speaks because you're his child. The shepherd never stops calling his sheep even when they wander too far to respond. So if you feel lost in the storm of your thoughts, stop searching for thunder and start listening for the stillness. The same God who calmed the sea can calm your mind, but you must let him speak in his way, not yours. There's power in quieting yourself. When you pause, you reclaim authority over the noise that tries to own you. The world says you must keep moving to survive, but the kingdom says, be still and know that I am God. That knowing is not intellectual, it's experiential. It's when you finally feel his peace replacing your panic. His order untangling your confusion, His light breaking through the fog. Right now, if your mind feels like a battlefield, don't try to silence every thought. Invite God into them. Let His presence meet you in the middle of the noise instead of waiting for silence to arrive first. The whisper will find you where you are. It has never stopped calling your name. And once you hear it, even faintly, everything else begins to lose its power. The voice beneath the noise is not far away. It is within you, pulsing with every breath that keeps you alive. It's the voice that spoke creation into being and still speaks creation into your chaos. So breathe. Listen. The noise may be loud, but the whisper is stronger. It carries the truth your soul has been waiting to hear. You are not alone. You are not beyond repair. And the one who speaks peace into storms is still speaking peace into you. God in the waiting room. Waiting is one of the hardest tests of faith. It's the space between prayer and the answer, the stretch of silence where nothing seems to move. You've asked, you've believed, you've cried, and still the heavens feel still. You check for signs, but none appear. You feel forgotten in the line of miracles, watching others receive while you keep waiting. Yet, what if this waiting isn't punishment? What if it's preparation? What if the silence isn't delay but design? The waiting room of God is not an empty space. It's where unseen transformation takes place. When God seems slow, He is never late. He works in layers, not seconds. He measures healing by depth, not speed. The world moves fast and demands results, but heaven moves precisely, shaping what will last. You may feel like nothing is happening, but underground, roots are growing. God is deepening your trust, strengthening your patience, teaching you to rest when everything inside you screams to act. The waiting room is where faith matures from wanting blessings to desiring the blesser Himself. You see, we love the God of miracles, but struggle with the God of waiting. We want resurrection without the tomb, answers without process, healing without surrender. Yet every great promise in Scripture was born in delay. Abraham waited decades for his child. Joseph waited years in prisons and pits. David waited to wear the crown that had already been promised. Even Jesus waited 30 years in obscurity before His public ministry began. Heaven has a rhythm, and it doesn't rush for human schedules. If you are waiting, you are in divine company. It's in waiting that your motives are refined. You begin to ask not just for what you want, but for what aligns with God's will. Waiting exposes what you truly believe, whether your faith rests in outcomes or in God's character. When nothing changes, will you still trust Him? When silence stretches longer than you expected, will you believe that He's still working? Because faith is not proven in the blessing, it's proven in the pause before it arrives. In the waiting room, God often removes distractions you didn't know were there. He slows your steps so your soul can catch up. He teaches you to live without constant confirmation. That's why it feels lonely. Because He's teaching you to hear His whisper in solitude. The waiting becomes sacred when you stop measuring it by time and start seeing it as intimacy. Waiting is not inactivity. It's participation in God's timing. When you trust His pace, you start to see that the delay is not denial. It's divine alignment. Sometimes you think you're waiting for a door to open, but in truth, God is still building the hallway that leads to it. He won't release you into a blessing you can't yet sustain. The waiting is His mercy, not His absence. It's the protection you don't recognize because it feels like pain. You cry for things that would crush you if given too soon, and God loves you too much to say yes before you're ready. Every day of waiting refines your heart, builds resilience, and proves that hope is stronger than hurry. You may look at your life and think it's standing still, but something powerful is happening beneath the surface. Seeds don't sprout the day they're planted. They grow in the dark, hidden from sight, until the moment God commands the earth to release them. You are that seed. The darkness you feel is not death. It's the soil of transformation. God hasn't buried you, He's planting you. And when it's time, what He's been cultivating in secret will break through the surface in beauty you couldn't have imagined. In the waiting room, heaven is closer than you think. Every breath of patience, every prayer whispered through tears, every day you choose to trust, it all becomes worship. God counts those moments as faith's finest hour. You don't have to understand the timing to rest in His hands. The same God who promised to never leave you hasn't forgotten your name. He's not ignoring you. He's preparing everything around you so that when the right moment comes, nothing can stop what He's planned. So stay where you are, not in despair but in expectation. Don't rush the process that's building your strength. When your time comes, it will unfold with precision, not coincidence. The waiting room is not the end of your story. It's the chapter where your faith learns to breathe without evidence. When you can praise God before the door opens, that's when heaven knows you're ready to walk through it. And one day, when you look back, you'll realize the waiting wasn't wasted. It was the place where your heart grew quiet enough to hear Him clearly, strong enough to trust Him fully, and humble enough to follow Him completely. Waiting is never easy, but it's always worth it. Because the God who called you into the waiting room is the same God who knows exactly when to call your name and say, "It's time." The wound that became an altar. Some wounds change you so deeply that you can never go back to who you were before. They mark you. They shape you. They leave a scar that time alone can't erase. You may not realize it now, but every scar carries a story that heaven has been writing behind the scenes. The pain that once seemed like a curse can become the place where God meets you most intimately. What if the very thing that broke you was never meant to destroy you, but to bring you face to face with the God who heals? What if your deepest wound could become the altar where His love burns brightest? We often want healing without exposure, restoration without remembrance. Yet God doesn't hide from your pain. He redeems it. He steps into your brokenness not to erase your story, but to transform it. Think of Jacob wrestling through the night. He walked away limping, yet forever blessed. His wound became his testimony. Think of Jesus resurrected from death. He could have returned flawless, but He kept His scars. Why? Because those marks were proof of love, not defeat. Your wound doesn't disqualify you. It identifies you as someone who's been touched by grace. The altar of pain is sacred because it's where pretending ends. When you stop running from what hurts and finally lay it before God, something miraculous begins to happen. The wound that once defined your weakness becomes the very place His strength is revealed. He doesn't need you to hide your sorrow. He asks you to offer it. Every tear, every question, every moment of despair becomes incense rising toward heaven. And on that altar, what once symbolized loss starts to shine as evidence of survival. It's hard to understand this while you're bleeding. It feels cruel to call pain sacred when it still aches. But altars were never built in comfort. They were built in surrender. Abraham didn't understand why God asked for Isaac. He only understood obedience. Job didn't comprehend his suffering, yet he never stopped speaking to God from within it. Their prayers were not neat, they were raw. And that honesty is what turned their wounds into worship. Your pain too can become holy ground if you dare to bring it honestly before God. So many try to escape their wounds, numbing them with distractions, with busyness, with denial. But escape is temporary. The only way out is through. And as you walk through it, God walks with you. He's not waiting on the other side of your pain. He's standing in the middle of it, holding the very pieces that you think are too shattered to fix. Every sigh, every sleepless night, every breath that hurts. He collects them, not as reminders of suffering, but as materials for redemption. Nothing offered to Him in faith is ever wasted. When you bring your pain to the altar, it changes form. The bitterness starts to soften. The anger gives way to understanding. The loneliness becomes conversation. You realize that the wound has not just taken from you, it's taught you. It taught you compassion. It taught you humility. It taught you the language of empathy that can now reach others who are hurting. Pain shared with God becomes wisdom. Pain offered to Him becomes purpose. And one day you'll meet someone standing in the same darkness you once knew, and you'll realize your wound was never just about you. It was about giving hope to someone else. Your altar may not look like stone. It might look like your journal. your prayers, your quiet surrender. But make no mistake, every time you choose to worship instead of despair, to trust instead of give up, you are building something eternal. The ashes you bring are not evidence of defeat. They're the raw material God uses to form beauty. And beauty that rises from ashes has a fragrance the unbroken will never understand. The wound that became an altar will always carry a scar, but scars are not signs of weakness. They're signs of healing. They don't erase the pain. They prove that it no longer defines you. What once brought tears will one day bring testimony. You'll remember what it felt like to break, but more than that, you'll remember the moment God began to rebuild you. The same place where you fell will become the place you worship. The same story that once silenced you will become the story that sets others free. So look at your wound not as an enemy, but as a doorway. Kneel beside it, breathe deeply, and invite God to meet you there. Let the pain become prayer. Let the sorrow become offering. And as you do, you'll realize that the altar you built in tears is where resurrection begins. You're not being punished, you're being purified. You're not being buried, and you're being planted. And one day, the wound that once hurt the most will become the sacred proof that love never left you, not even for a moment. When heaven rewrites your identity, there comes a moment when pain no longer just wounds you. It begins to whisper lies about who you are. Depression tells you that you are broken beyond repair. Shame says you are unworthy of love. Failure convinces you that you've disappointed God too deeply to be restored. Slowly, without even realizing it, you start to agree with those voices. You begin to see yourself not as a child of God, but as the sum of your mistakes, your losses, and your exhaustion. Yet heaven does not call you by your wounds. Heaven calls you by your name, the one spoken over you before your first breath, the one that pain can never erase. When heaven rewrites your identity, it doesn't give you a new label. It reminds you of an old truth. Before the world defined you by your success or your suffering, you were already known. The scriptures say, "Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you." That means your story didn't begin with what broke you. It began with what God intended for you. The depression, the betrayal, the disappointment, none of it defines you. Those are chapters, not the title. And God, as the author, still holds the pen. Sometimes you have to lose who you thought you were for God to reveal who you really are. Pain strips away false identities we've built on fragile foundations: achievements, approval, perfection, control. It tears down everything temporary so that the eternal can take root. You may feel like you've lost everything, but what if that loss is the clearing where truth can finally grow? Heaven is not trying to erase your humanity. It's trying to awaken your divinity, that sacred reflection of God's image within you that no darkness can destroy. When you believe the lies of despair, your vision narrows. You stop seeing yourself as capable of healing. You begin to live smaller, pray smaller, hope smaller. But God looks at you and sees someone who still carries His breath, His image, His potential. You may feel crushed, but you are not condemned. You may feel forgotten, but you are still chosen. The label the world gave you, depressed, broken, hopeless, does not match the label heaven has written. Beloved, redeemed, mine. Every time you choose to believe that truth, even faintly, your identity is being rewritten from within. There's a moment in every believer's journey when God allows an identity to die so that a new one can be born. Think of Saul becoming Paul, the persecutor turned preacher. Think of Simon becoming Peter, the impulsive fisherman turned rock of the church. Think of Jacob, who wrestled with God until his name changed to Israel. Each of them met God at a breaking point, and it was there, in exhaustion, not strength, that their true names were spoken. You are no different. The same God who renamed them is still rewriting stories today, including yours. When heaven rewrites your identity, it doesn't always erase the past. It redeems it. What once disqualified you becomes the very reason others believe. Your weakness becomes your authority to speak healing. Your pain becomes proof of purpose. You become a living letter of grace, written not in ink, but in endurance. You begin to see that you were never defined by what happened to you, but by what God did through it. The hardest part is allowing God to remove the names you've given yourself. Names like not enough, unwanted, too late. You repeat them silently until they become truth in your mind, but they are not heaven's truth. God calls you something entirely different. My child, my creation, my delight. And once you start hearing that voice again, the lies lose their grip. Because you can't live in both identities. One must die for the other to thrive. The one that dies is the one built by pain. The one that lives is the one written by grace. So let God rewrite you. Let Him redefine what strength means, what beauty means, what success means. You don't have to understand the whole story to trust the author. All you need is the courage to turn the page. The person you were before the storm is not the person you're meant to be after it. God uses every trial, every tear, every shadow to reveal a truer version of you. One shaped not by fear, but by faith. You may not see the new name yet, but it's already being written. It's being formed in your patience, in your prayers, in your quiet persistence to keep believing when nothing makes sense. Heaven's rewriting doesn't happen in a moment. It unfolds with every step of surrender. And one day you'll look in the mirror and recognize someone stronger, freer and more radiant than the one who entered the valley. You'll see the reflection of a child loved beyond measure, no longer living by borrowed identities, but by divine truth. When heaven rewrites your identity, it's not about becoming someone new. It's about remembering who you've always been in God's eyes. No label of pain, no diagnosis, no failure, no betrayal can undo that truth. You are still chosen. You are still loved. You are still His. And the moment you believe that again, the light begins to return to your soul. That's where healing begins. Not when your circumstances change, but when you finally remember your name. The healing hidden in connection. We are born to heal through one another. God never intended for souls to recover in isolation, yet pain has a way of convincing you that being alone is safer. Depression whispers that no one would understand, that reaching out would only burden others, that it's easier to retreat behind a quiet smile than to risk rejection. But isolation is not protection. It's slow suffocation. Healing begins the moment you let yourself be seen. Even the smallest act of connection, a conversation, a shared silence, a simple "I understand," can open a door for God's light to enter through another human being. God often heals through people. His compassion wears human faces. His voice sounds through the words of friends. His comfort arrives in the arms that hold you when you can't pray. You may ask for a miracle from heaven and not realize that the answer is knocking at your door in the form of community. When Jesus walked the earth, He never healed from a distance alone. He touched the sick, spoke to the forgotten, ate with the rejected. Every act of connection was divine medicine for a broken world. The same power flows today through kindness, empathy, and love shared between hearts. Sometimes the greatest step of faith is not believing God will do everything for you, but allowing Him to do it through someone else. Letting another person into your struggle does not make you weak. It makes you human. When you share your pain, you give others permission to share theirs, and together, you become witnesses of redemption. This is how the church was always meant to work, not as a building of perfect people, but as a refuge for the wounded who help one another stand. You might have been hurt by people before, betrayed by someone you trusted, dismissed by those who should have cared. That pain can make you want to close every door, but even though people can wound, they can also heal. God redeems community by restoring what broken relationships stole from you. Not everyone deserves your deepest vulnerability, but someone does. The enemy isolates because he knows connection brings strength. Two candles together burn brighter than one alone, and light always defeats darkness when it's shared. Connection is sacred because it mirrors the heart of God. From the beginning, He said it was not good for man to be alone. Even Jesus, carrying the weight of the world, chose friends to walk beside Him. In His darkest hour, He asked them to stay awake and pray with Him. If the Son of God desired companionship in suffering, Why should you feel guilty for needing it too? To need people is not a flaw in your faith. It's part of your design. There is a special kind of healing that happens when someone looks at you and says, "Me too." It breaks shame in an instant. Shame cannot survive where empathy exists. When your story meets someone else's compassion, something divine ignites. The realization that you were never fighting alone. Healing multiplies when it's shared. The love of God doesn't just descend vertically from heaven. It also flows horizontally between hearts willing to care. Letting people in doesn't mean everyone will understand your pain, but the right ones will stay, even when they don't. They won't need to fix you. Their presence will remind you that you're worth standing beside. Sometimes their faith holds you when yours runs out. Sometimes your survival strengthens theirs. That's how grace works. It moves in both directions. You give it, you receive it, and healing flows in the exchange. You may think you have nothing left to offer, but your honesty is enough. Sharing your story is not a sign that you're still broken. It's proof that you're healing. The same words that once described your pain will one day describe your purpose. You will become the very comfort you once prayed for. And when someone reaches out to you from their own darkness, you will remember how light first found you, through connection. God's design has always been relational because love cannot exist in isolation. To be fully alive is to love and to be loved, even when it risks pain. Healing thrives in the soil of togetherness. Every hug, every prayer, every shared tear builds a bridge back to life. You don't have to walk this road alone. You never were supposed to. Reach out. Let someone see the real you. Allow the walls you've built to become windows where light can enter again. Healing is not found in the absence of people, but in the presence of those who reflect God's heart. And when connection begins to rebuild what loneliness tore down, you'll understand why heaven hid so much of your healing in the touch, the voice, and the love of others. The miracle in the ordinary day. Most people expect miracles to arrive wrapped in brilliance, thunder in the sky, light splitting the darkness, a sudden change that makes everything new. But God's greatest miracles rarely announce themselves. They come quietly, hidden in the rhythm of ordinary days. They appear in the breath you take without realizing it, in the sunrise that returns after a night of despair, in the strength that comes out of nowhere just when you thought you couldn't keep going. The world teaches you to wait for extraordinary signs, but heaven hides its wonders in simple moments, in the everyday scenes you overlook. It's easy to miss the divine when you're searching for drama. You expect the sea to part, the mountain to move, the storm to cease instantly. But what if the true miracle is that you're still standing after all you've endured? What if the fact that your heart keeps beating, that you still choose hope, that you got out of bed this morning, is itself the proof of God's power? The breath you just took was not random. It was permission from heaven for another chance to begin again. The ordinary is where God builds endurance. Faith grows in the unseen, in the small and steady acts of perseverance that don't make headlines. The same God who performed wonders in Scripture also delights in the humble details of your daily life. He's in the hand that holds yours when words fail, in the meal shared when your appetite for joy feels gone, in the quiet moment when gratitude appears for no reason at all. Every ordinary thing can become holy if you learn to see it through the eyes of faith. Think about the way Jesus lived. Before he preached to crowds, he spent years doing ordinary work as a carpenter. Before he raised Lazarus, he wept. Before he calmed storms, he walked along dusty roads. The Son of God did not avoid the ordinary. He filled it with divinity. That's why your own simple acts, washing dishes, caring for your children, showing kindness to a stranger, can be expressions of worship. Miracles aren't always events that interrupt your life. Sometimes they are the very heartbeat of your life itself. When your mind is heavy with longing for something greater, pause and look around. The answer you're waiting for may already be unfolding in ways too gentle to notice. Healing often begins in the quiet restoration of routine. You start to feel a little lighter. You find laughter again without forcing it. You experience a moment of peace that doesn't make sense. These are the early signs that God's grace is at work. Heaven rarely shouts, it whispers. But those whispers, when heard, can move mountains inside you. Miracles are not always about removing pain. Sometimes they are about revealing purpose within it. You may think nothing is happening, but every breath, every act of endurance, every decision to keep living is a testimony of divine power sustaining you. The small victories, getting through the day, forgiving someone, choosing not to quit, are the building blocks of transformation. God doesn't only show up in the spectacular, He shows up in the steady. The miracle in the ordinary day is that grace keeps flowing, even when you feel nothing special. The same air that fills your lungs fills the world with possibility. You don't need to chase signs from heaven when heaven already surrounds you. Every sunrise declares mercy. Every heartbeat declares purpose. Every ordinary day is a canvas painted with God's unseen love. Stop waiting for perfection to feel grateful. Gratitude doesn't follow the miracle, it reveals it. The moment you start to thank God for the small things stop feeling small. Your eyes begin to recognize divine fingerprints everywhere. In the way the light falls through your window, in the friend who texts you at the right time, in the quiet sense that you're not alone. That awareness turns ordinary time into sacred time. Even in your weariness, God is near. When you make your coffee, when you take a walk, when you breathe a prayer that feels too simple, He's there. The miracle is not that He changes every circumstance, but that He never leaves you inside any of them. If you can learn to see Him in the ordinary, you'll find that the extraordinary has been with you all along. So today, look closer. The ground beneath your feet may not feel like holy ground, but it is. The same God who turned water into wine can turn your daily routine into revelation. The same Savior who broke bread to feed a crowd can break your monotony to feed your soul. Every moment you live, breathe, love, forgive, and begin again. That's the miracle you've been waiting for, the return of the voice. There comes a day when the silence begins to break. It doesn't happen all at once. It begins softly, like the first note of a song you thought you'd forgotten. You don't even realize it at first. A lighter breath, a fleeting smile, a single moment of calm that doesn't vanish as quickly as it used to. That's the sign. The voice of your soul, once buried under sorrow and fear, starts to return. The melody that depression tried to destroy begins to hum again, quietly but insistently, because what God creates can never be permanently silenced. The song He wrote in you is eternal, and no darkness can erase its sound. The return of your voice is not a loud victory, it's a gentle awakening. It happens when your prayers stop feeling like begging and start feeling like breathing. When you no longer force yourself to believe, but begin to feel belief living inside you again. It's when you realize that God never stopped speaking, you just stopped recognizing His tone. The same voice that once called you out of fear is still calling you back to life. You start to see the fingerprints of grace in ordinary moments, in laughter that returns uninvited, in hope that rises unexplainably, in strength that greets you quietly each morning. The voice of your soul doesn't return through perfection, it returns through surrender. When you stop fighting the pain and start letting it teach you, something shifts. You begin to hear God not as an echo outside you, but as a whisper within. His spirit and yours start to harmonize again. You remember what it feels like to belong, not because the pain is gone, but because peace has finally made its home beside it. The return of the voice is the sound of resurrection inside the living. It's the proof that healing is not forgetting what hurt you. It's learning to sing even with the scar. It's easy to mistake silence for absence. But silence can also be incubation, the hidden space where God is rewriting your song. When you finally begin to speak again, it's not the same voice that was lost. It's a new one, deeper, richer, carrying the resonance of everything you've survived. Your tone changes. Your words carry weight. You speak not to be heard, but to heal. And when you do, your voice becomes a testimony, a living echo of God's power to restore what was broken beyond recognition. You may not notice when the turning point comes. It might happen on a day like any other, when the morning light touches your face and for the first time in a long time, you don't feel dread. You take a deep breath and realize you are not the same person who entered the valley. You are gentler now, slower to judge, quicker to forgive. You speak differently because pain has taught you the sacredness of words. You use your voice to build, not to wound. And as you do, you sense God's pleasure, because this is what He was shaping in you all along, a soul that sings even after the storm. Your voice is not only your sound, it's your power, your purpose. The enemy tried to silence it because he knew what it carries, the ability to inspire, to comfort, to lift others out of despair. When you find it again, use it. Speak life over your days. Pray aloud. Sing, even if it cracks. Tell your story. There is someone out there who needs to hear it to believe that healing is possible. Your voice may be the key that unlocks another person's prison. Don't underestimate it. When heaven restores a voice, it does so for a mission. And remember this: the voice that returns is never the same as the one that was lost. It's wiser now, humbler, saturated with compassion. It no longer speaks from the surface. It speaks from the depths. It carries the sound of survival, of grace rediscovered. The angels recognize that tone. It's the sound of someone who has walked through the fire and come out with praise still in their mouth. That voice is precious to God because it testifies of endurance, of love that outlasted pain. So when your voice returns, whether through words, music, prayer, or simple gratitude, use it. Let it rise without fear, without apology. You don't need to be perfect to speak again. You just need to be willing. The same God who gave you breath has been waiting to hear it used in worship again. The same Spirit who hovered over chaos is now hovering over your healing. You've waited long enough. It's time to sing again. And when you do, the heavens will respond. Because your voice, reborn through pain and redeemed by faith, is not just yours. It's the sound of resurrection itself, the light that never left. Every story of healing leads to one revelation: the light never left you. It may have dimmed, it may have flickered behind clouds of pain, but it was never gone. Through every sleepless night, every unanswered prayer, every tear that burned like salt, the light of God stayed within you, steady as a heartbeat. You couldn't always see it, but it saw you. It carried you when you thought you were standing still. The same light that called creation into existence has been burning quietly inside your chest, whispering that there is more to live for, more to become, more to believe. When you look back, you'll realize that every moment you thought you were abandoned was actually the moment you were being carried. God was not outside your suffering watching from a distance. He was inside it, guiding every step you took through the dark. The valley didn't consume you because His hand never let go. The silence wasn't punishment. It was the stillness before revelation. The pain wasn't the end, and it was the plow breaking the soil so new life could grow. And through it all, the light remained. That light is not something you earn. It's something you inherit. It's the divine imprint within every soul, a spark of eternity that cannot be extinguished by circumstance. Depression tried to drown it. Fear tried to suffocate it, but neither succeeded. Because what comes from God carries His permanence. The light He gives is not fragile. It doesn't depend on mood, luck, or human understanding. It's steady, eternal, unshaken. Even in your weakest hour, it stayed with you, waiting for the moment your eyes would open again. This is the mystery of redemption. The very darkness that tried to destroy you became the canvas for God's glory to shine brighter. What once felt like loss now becomes perspective. The questions that haunted you turn into wisdom. The pain that silenced you turns into compassion. And as the dawn rises again in your soul, you understand you were never walking toward the light. The light was walking with you all along. Look around you now. The evidence of that light is everywhere. It's in the peace that finally feels real. It's in the strength that surprises you. It's in the way your heart begins to dream again after years of silence. Every breath you take now is a testimony that darkness doesn't win. It never did. Because the one who is light himself lives in you, and he cannot lose. So lift your head. You don't have to chase the light anymore. You are carrying it. Every scar, every tear, every moment of surrender has turned your heart into a lantern for others still walking in the dark. You are proof that God restores what despair tried to destroy. You are living evidence that even when everything fades, His love endures. The light that never left is the reason you're still here. It's the echo of grace that kept whispering, "Not yet, not over." It's the quiet miracle of survival that no one saw but heaven celebrated. And now that you can feel it again, let it guide you forward. Let it lead you to forgive, to hope, to serve, to live with purpose. Let it shine through your words, your kindness, your courage. Because somewhere, someone is still standing in the same darkness you once knew. And they need to see your light, to believe that theirs can return too. That's how redemption completes its circle. The same God who lit your flame sends you back into the world as His reflection. Not to be perfect, but to remind others that even in silence, even in sorrow, even in the deepest valley, the light never leaves. This is where the journey ends and begins again. You've walked through the shadow, faced the silence, wrestled with faith, and now stand radiant with the truth that was always yours. You are not what was broken. You are what survived. You are what was loved through it all. The light is not just around you. It is you, burning with the quiet fire of redemption. Let it shine, because the story of your survival is the proof that God still brings beauty out of ashes, and that His light, the light that never left, will lead you home.